Mountaineer Nation, let's ride.
But Don Nealon's Mountaineers enjoy walking in where angels fear to tread. As the hills of West Virginia resound with the sounds of Golden Blue football. Here is Harrison trouble, stiff arms, a would-be tackler, comes down over the 25 to 20, goes around about it to 15 to 10 to 5, a touchdown West Virginia, he did it!
Takes the Slater one-on-one with a defender, look at that run!
West Virginia football, you know what that's about, they don't know what it's about, West Virginia football, we're all our people.
Let them know. Leave no doubt tonight. Leave no doubt tonight. No doubt. They shouldn't have played the old Golden Blue.
It is a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be.
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome back to the Country Roads webcast here. Special edition live stream here. I want to talk about some of the coaching staff news that happened late last night was when it kind of broke over on Ear Sports, actually, the 247 site there. Mike Cazaza wrote an article, which I'm going to share with you guys here in a little bit, talking about who West Virginia ultimately decided to land on as wide receivers coach in Bilal Marshall. And we know West Virginia has two positions open on the offensive staff, or if you didn't know, they do have two positions all open on the offensive staff. Of course, for those that don't know, Tony Washington leaving West Virginia, the wide receivers coach. That's why Bilal Marshall is coming in. And I'm sure you already knew West Virginia moving on, or excuse me, Graham Harrell moving on from West Virginia, I guess I should say, going to produce. So West Virginia looking for an offensive coordinator and a quarterbacks coach, though I believe the offensive coordinator part kind of in name only and more so a quarterbacks coach, as I believe Neil Brown's looking to run the offense again, from what I understand, in 2023. But having said that, going to cover a little bit of those. Want to share that article with you guys, talk a little bit about Bilal Marshall being hired as West Virginia's wide receivers coach for the 2023 season, and then talk about a target for the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks position that West Virginia went after. There was advanced talks. A lot of people thought he was going to end up here for sure, and it fell through. And that's a familiar name, I think, for fans, and kind of was a fan favorite when he was here. Mountaineer quarterback back in 2014, for a hint there, if you don't already know. But we'll get into that a little bit. But, of course, along the way, I won't stay with you guys too long. Waiting on my fiance to get back home, and then we got some plans for the evening. But in the meantime, figured do a live stream just to kind of talk about this, because I wanted to do a video about it, but I hadn't really got a chance to. I've been really busy, but I've got some time now off of work the next couple of days. So hopefully I'll be able to get more things out. But I figured the easiest way to talk about these two subjects rather than doing some videos was just doing a live stream with you guys and chatting about it with you guys, getting your thoughts live. And that's why I'm adding a Q&A segment as well. I haven't done a Q&A live stream in a while, so we'll kind of mix the two here. I'll talk a little bit about the coaching news, and then anything that comes up that you guys want to talk about, of course, can direct the conversation from there. Give your thoughts on the West Virginia coaching changes, anything you want to talk about, WVU-related basketball, football, you name it, questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the chat, and we'll address them all here before we end up on this live stream. But appreciate you tuning in. Anyway that you're tuning in here, I'm live streaming, of course, on the Country Roads webcast, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch pages, all three platforms there. But if you're tuned in on the YouTube side, while you're in here, let me get this out of the way. Do us a favor, please. Hit the like button. I know it's crazy, but just hitting that little thumbs up button right there really helps this video because of how the YouTube algorithm works. And not only does it help this video, but it helps future videos here on the channel and really helps the channel's performance overall. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Helps us, helps you, helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. Having said that, like I always encourage you, drop your thoughts here in the chat. I know it's a little bit earlier than I do these. Usually try and do them later in the evening, but like I said, got plans this evening, but wanted to talk about this, before it was talked about to death, which I'm sure, it's going to be talked about a lot moving forward. And there'll be more to talk about with staff changes, of course, when West Virginia does ultimately land on an offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach to replace Graham Harrell. But in the meantime, they have landed on a wide receivers coach in Bilal Marshall, and we can talk about that one. Now, let me try and share the screen with you guys real quick. Bear with me momentarily. And like I said, if you're here tuned in, drop your thoughts there in the chat along the way. We'll talk about the hiring of Bilal Marshall, come back, see if anybody's got any thoughts in here, catch up with you guys a little bit, and then talk about West Virginia's remaining search for an offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach and who they targeted. It's a name I think you guys will like to hear if you haven't heard already. And it was kind of the more interesting part of the story to me, really, than even West Virginia hiring a wide receivers coach, is who they almost hired as offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, and how that ultimately fell through. And I know a lot of Mountaineer fans are kind of up in arms about it following through and thinking it's a bad look for the program. And I don't disagree optics wise. I guess it really kind of is, but I also can't blame, certain people for not wanting to come to West Virginia at this moment, just because two factors. Number one, like I said earlier, I think Neil Brown's going to want control over this offense in 2023. He's ultimately going to be the one scheming it up and probably the one calling the plays. So whoever they're hiring as offensive coordinator is probably going to be offensive coordinator in name only. They're really mainly going to be a quarterback's coach. And also the fact that we know Neil Brown is on the hot seat. So we'll think of it this way. If you're at a job and you get a offer from a better position ultimately, right? Maybe it's making more and it's a, higher level, a promotion, let's say, which I think in this case you could say, because this person that we'll talk about here later in the video, of course, was a group of five, is a group of five coordinator, and he would have been, a Power 5 coordinator in this title there. So if you're at a job and you ultimately can get a promotion and go somewhere else, but the caveat is, if you come here, I can't guarantee you'll be here longer than 12 months, because I don't know if I'm going to be here longer than 12 months as, you're the person that's hiring you when we're talking about Neil Brown or, the football department there. So I can't really blame somebody for not taking the job. I know it's kind of a bad look for West Virginia in that aspect if he ultimately did turn it down, which is kind of the way it seems, is that he did, because what I've heard is that maybe, he didn't want to come here and just be coordinator name only, want a little bit more control over the offense than that. And I think also, the job security thing's an issue right now for West Virginia and trying to make this hire, I'm afraid. But having said that, West Virginia has made a hire, and it is Bilal Marshall, wide receivers coach. He was a graduate assistant at West Virginia in the past. Played wide receiver at Purdue. Let me share this screen with you guys here, and we'll talk a little bit about Bilal Marshall being hired as the West Virginia wide receivers coach. And as I said, you guys, please drop your questions, comments, concerns here along the way. I'll come back with you guys and catch up on those before we talk about the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach search, which remains ongoing now. Let's see if we can get this pulled up here. Like I said, from 247 Sports, the Ear Sports guys there, Mike Kazaza breaking this late last. Let's see here. Make full screen for you guys so you can probably read it a little bit better if I do that. And bear with me if my audio sounds a little bit choppy throughout. Sometimes when I share my screen, it happens. My audio lags a little bit. But, of course, that's the good thing about sharing the screen, is you can read along as well if it does happen to do that. But having said that, as you can see, as I said, from Mike Kazaza, WVU set to hire a familiar name as wide receivers coach, which, yes, familiar as he was here before, but maybe not familiar to some. I think if you follow the program closely, you probably remember the name. If not, maybe not as familiar as the other name we'll talk about later on when we're talking offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach potentially. But here we are. Work on West Virginia's football staff is underway. Incorporated familiar names for the two vacancies. Sources told Ear Sports the main target for the receivers coach is Bilal Marshall, which, now it seems the hire is kind of imminent at this point. Former WVU graduate assistant, currently the Watson, obviously. Tony Washington departed to rejoin Jamie Chadwell at Liberty. Jamie Chadwell was at Coastal Carolina, which is where West Virginia hired Tony Washington away from. Jamie Chadwell, now the head coach at Liberty, goes out, gets Tony Washington to come back and rejoin him, be wide receivers coach again, which is what led to this opening that is filled by Bilal Marshall for West Virginia. As you see here, Marshall was a graduate assistant who worked with the receivers in 2020, 2021. This past season with the Cadets was his first as a full-time, on-field assistant in college football. And I don't know if there's any truth to this or if it's just, something that people are kind of maybe wishfully thinking, and I wouldn't be mad about, and I'm sure a lot of you guys wouldn't either. But Bilal Marshall obviously has a relationship with Caden Prather. Maybe this, I don't want to say it's a ploy to get him to come back, but this couldn't hurt if you're trying to convince Caden Prather, hey, leave the portal, come back, give us another chance. We're going to do some different things. We got a guy that knows you and Bilal Marshall. We're going to really well. And initially, I think the guy, they can get him hired for offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. And I worked out to this. A couple others. I don't know how true those are, so I'm not going to talk about those for, just purely speculative, because we do know of one name here that we'll talk about momentarily that did not work out that they were going after there. So, but as far as Marshall is concerned, a native of Florida, played receiver at Purdue, caught 47 passes for 554 yards and 3 touchdowns in his career there. 3-star recruit in high school, ranked number 80 in Florida in the 2012 class. It was actually a quarterback recruit there, number 16 among dual threat quarterbacks. Finished his college career 4-for-8 as a passer, actually. Okay. So there we have it. Bilal Marshall taking over as West Virginia wide receivers coach. Coached VMI's receivers this past season. So I think not exactly maybe a splash hire that some fans were maybe hoping to hear at the wide receiver name when you're talking about this. Let me stop sharing this screen for a second, and I'll share it again with you guys when we talk about the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. But I think a lot of people were thinking of maybe Stedman Bailey. A lot of people were talking Ryan Switzer. I would have been very excited about either one of those names. I think Switzer really should have had, maybe he did have a chance. I don't know, who knows, but I would have loved to have seen that. I know he was around the program last spring, and, I was talking to our friend Mountaineer Paul over at Mountaineer Paul Talks Football, which I'm sure you guys know, but if not, go follow him on YouTube as well for some great West Virginia content. But me and him were talking earlier today about it, and I said, that's one of the things we brought up is Switzer also could help the West Virginia special teams, make him, kind of the return game coordinator maybe for punt returns and kick returns, because that's an area where West Virginia has struggled in the past. We haven't returned a punt since I think 2012 was the last one when Tavon Austin did it, so nearly a decade. So I would have loved to have seen that, but personally, I know it's not a name that everyone's really excited about, because a lot of people are like, who? They don't even remember him being the graduate assistant in West Virginia, maybe if they didn't follow that closely enough, because, who really follows and keeps up with the graduate assistants? I think very few and far between. I'm crazy like that, as I think few of us are, but I think with Marshall, it's not a name that I'm upset about. I think it's a guy that's young and an up-and-comer that we've seen, West Virginia kind of make this hire with their wide receiver position in the Neil Brown era. It really falls in line with what they've done. Xavier Dye was the first one. And then, Tony Washington, another up-and-comer. And then, of course, now again with Marshall. Who knows how it'll turn out, but I think having a relationship with this staff where he can hit the ground running was definitely a factor in going out and getting him, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens here. A lot of wide receiver coach turnover in the Neil Brown era. I believe this is the 4th one in his 5th season, if I'm not mistaken, in his 5 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. But we'll see how it turns out. Not a hire to be upset about, I don't think, by any means. Hopefully some of the fans aren't up in arms about it, but we'll see. I like it, though. I think as far as Neil Brown and this staff is concerned, getting someone that has experience with them when you're on the hot seat in a must-win year in 2023 isn't a bad move. And especially if, like I talked about earlier, who knows, maybe they can convince Caden Prather with the relationship he has with Bilal Marshall. We'll see what happens. But we'll talk a little bit about the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach position as well here towards the end. But I want to catch up with you guys that are in here in the chat. I know it's a little bit earlier in the evening than we usually do so there might not be as many people in here. But if not, hopefully you guys catch it on the playback. I may try and upload a little bit of the audio the podcast platforms as well for you guys that like to tune into the Country Roads webcast on podcast platforms. Appreciate you guys tuning in here as I'm live streaming on the Country Roads webcast, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch pages. Jerry Cicalella. I'm probably butchering that name. I apologize, Jerry, but Jerry, appreciate you tuning in and chiming in here. Says, man, how the program's perception has fallen. You can't buy a former Mountaineer to come back home from Marshall, no less. Yeah, perfect time and perfect segue. Going to get right into that momentarily. I'm sure for those of you that haven't heard, yeah, I know it's a bad look right now. It's a bad look. for the program. Indeed, Jerry, I can't argue with you there. But also, you can't really blame Clint Trickett. Like I said earlier, it's just not a good situation right now. It's hard to put a positive spin on it. It really is. But I think hopefully ultimately the positive spin is West Virginia maybe ends up making a good hire still. Nonetheless, there's good names out there and they're going to target some people when they have enough cash here to make a pretty decent hire here, I believe. So we'll see what happens. But I agree. It's bad look right now. Eric Cruz, what's going on, Dad? Says, was sort of hoping for Stephen Bailey or Ryan Switzer as wide receivers coach. Yeah, great minds think alike. I didn't even see that. But he says that he expects Neil Brown to pretty much call offense, et cetera, since it's do or die for him. Exactly. That's kind of what I've been saying as well. And from what I've heard, that seems to be the case. Think that may be part of the reason that the talks fell apart with Clint Trickett, who we'll talk about here momentarily. But I agree. I would have loved to see Stephen Bailey or Ryan Switzer as wide receivers coach as well. Hopefully Marshall turns out good. Justin Campbell, what's going on, man? Appreciate you hopping in here and tuning in and chiming in as well. Says he would love to see WVU bring back some of the legacy players to coach or bring big name coaches in, but I don't want them to hitch their careers to a lame duck coach if Brown don't work out. Exactly. That's kind of the situation West Virginia's in right now, stuck between a rock and a hard place type deal, right? It's almost a catch-22 when you're trying to make these hires as for offensive assistants, and maybe that's why they haven't been able to get some of these names that we've wanted, like we'll talk about here momentarily. But I agree with you. Bringing in some legacy players would be great. And as far as we're talking, quarterback coach is what West Virginia needs. I know me and Bradley bought in the last episode of the CRW podcast. It was actually one of his wish list items on his Christmas wish list there we did on our Christmas themed episode, was hiring Pat White as quarterbacks coach. Why not? He has the experience now. I know a lot of people have been saying they want Pat White for offensive coordinator. Personally, I just don't think he's ready for that quite yet, not at the Power 5 level. But I think bringing him in as a position coach, as a quarterbacks coach would be awesome. And he would have the offensive coordinator title in name. So that would be great for his resume. And that would really bring the fan base in, because I think whatever you do with this offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach hire, I think it's got to be a name that really gets the fan base excited, because right now the fan base is not bought in. I'm worried about season ticket sales and things moving forward. Everyone knows how the situation is with Neil Brown. So it's very going to be, I think this is an important hire in the long run. I think and a lot of people feel that way as well. And that's why they're so upset with what we'll talk about right now with who West Virginia went out for offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach initially. That did not work out. But as I said, continue to drop your thoughts, questions, comments, concerns on this as we continue throughout. I'm going to share my screen with you guys one more time here on this article from Mike Kazaza to talk about West Virginia's target that they almost had locked down to replace Graham Harry, quarterbacks coach, which is a very familiar name. I know Mike Kazaza says in the article here, a familiar name is wide receivers coach, which is not incorrect, but I would also add that this name is probably even more familiar for Mountaineer fans for obvious reasons. But as you can see here in the article from Mike Kazaza, meanwhile, the search for a new quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator continues after reaching into the past and coming up empty. Sources said WVU interviewed former starting quarterback Clint Trickett, who is currently the quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator at Marshall. Talks advanced from there, but sources said a deal could not be reached and an offer was not extended to Trickett, who opted to remain with the Thundering Herd. The nature of the deal was not clear, but sources said WVU continues to offer new assistant coaches multi-year contracts. So interesting there. And I think that's something that I didn't pick up on before here, actually, is that it was advanced talks. And I think a lot of people think that he turned down our offer, but I think once the talks advanced, it looks like we ultimately decided not to extend the offer. So it seems like they were talking and they were getting to the point where they may, offer him a contract. And then what I'm guessing here, this is speculation on my part, obviously here, but what I'm guessing is maybe Neil Brown was kind of talking about, now you'll have the offensive coordinator title, but I'm going to be calling the plays, helping you scheme everything, and really running the offense on game day. You have the offensive coordinator title and be quarterbacks coach. At that point, Clint Trickett maybe said, nah, I'm already an offensive coordinator at Marshall. I kind of already have that, gig. And Charles Huff certainly has better job security than Neil Brown at this moment. West Virginia didn't ultimately extend the offer. And so, getting advanced talks and not getting an offer turned down, I guess sounds better optics wise. But either way, advanced talks with Clint Trickett, former West Virginia quarterback, was, going to be replacing Graham Harrell as offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach potentially if an offer would have been extended, which of course, according to this article from Mike Casazza, was not extended. As you can see, opting to remain at Marshall. And I think that's probably why a lot of West Virginia fans are upset here, is because Clint Trickett's at Marshall and it's almost like, oh, he's picking Marshall over WVU. But in my opinion, he's not really picking Marshall over WVU. He's really picking job security. I mean, if you want to get technical, yes, but it's purely job security to me. I mean, if think about it, job security and not having, full autonomy over the offense, which we were told Graham Harrell had, but we all know in speculation that we've all kind of been questioning that after seeing the offense last season. And we know that next season, Neil Brown's probably going to want to manage things. But either way, doesn't work out. West Virginia going to keep looking. Another name that's been brought up, of course, was Travis Trickett. That's not happening as he's been hired as offensive coordinator at Coastal Carolina. I was heard that there, may have been putting some feelers out for that one as well. Who knows? But definitely, Clint Trickett, we know there was advanced talks, but did not work out. So West Virginia is still on the hunt for a new offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach to replace Graham Harrell, but they do have a wide receivers coach in Bilal Marshall. But the good thing is West Virginia does have, a decent chunk of change set aside to maybe make a splash hire. But on the other side of that coin, the thing that I'm worried about with this for West Virginia is that I believe, Neil Brown, the rumors are, wants to, run the offense in 2023. So whoever's coming in is going to have an offensive coordinator title, and they could be a decent name, who knows, but they're not going to be running the offense. So that may detract some people from coming here as we see. Excuse me, I need to take a drink of my coffee here. But as we see the advanced talks with Clint Trickett falling apart, probably for that reason, West Virginia may have the money to get a big name, but are they going to be able to land that big name with these caveats that potentially are there moving forward? Who knows? But like I said, I would love to see us go after Pat White. I don't know if that's, something that he would be interested in, is coming back to the college level now that he's up as an offensive assistant in the NFL. But who knows? He's had, college experience, South Florida, Campbell University, Alcorn State, passing game coordinator at Campbell, I believe. And so he has, some experience. He wouldn't actually be running the offense, and he could coach the quarterbacks. I definitely fully have belief in that. So who knows what happens moving forward. But if you're not able to entice a potential, quote unquote, big name like you want, go out and get a legacy guy like Pat White, unite the fan base, and maybe try and go that route. But let me take a sip of my coffee here, and then I'll catch up with you guys in the chat. And if you guys have anything else you want to talk about, drop it in there here. Final thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, whether it be about Bilal Marshall being hired as West Virginia's coach. Who would you like to see West Virginia go after potentially as a target, as a new offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, as we now know they've missed on Clint Trickett. I know Pat White, like I said, is a good name for me. I know there's other names out there that have been thrown. Seth Luttrell, I think, is one that had been thrown out there. I don't see that happening because personally, I think if they went after Trickett, Seth Luttrell may have been someone they, tried to get in talks with before that, because if you got a pecking order, I'm sure Luttrell's ahead of Clint Trickett. So maybe that just didn't even go anywhere at all. Who knows? Like I said, Travis Trickett was another name that's brought up. He's being hired at Coastal Carolina. Clint Trickett, obviously not one. So, there's other names that have been thrown out there, of course, in the past. I know Willie Corn, a guy at Coastal Carolina, is a guy that people have talked about. The aforementioned Mountaineer Paul's brought him up to me, and I think that would be a good one as well to maybe try and bring in. Who knows? But what are your guys' thoughts on offensive coordinator and the quarterbacks coach search that remains ongoing for West Virginia now after they weren't able to reach the point to extend a contract to Clint Trickett, unfortunately? Anyone there you guys would like to see, or any thoughts on that you guys have, drop them here in the chat, and we'll catch up on those real quick before I get up out of here. Justin Campbell, again, appreciate you, man, says, only way I see them landing a big name coach as offensive coordinator is to contract them as interim head coach if Brown is fired. That's interesting. That's interesting point there. That could work out. That could work out indeed. But also then you could run into the potential of running into another situation like the, Coach Stu, rest in peace, and Dana Holgerson fiasco that happened when he tried to do that, and you were going to bring in Holgerson as offensive coordinator for a year, and then, of course, that never ultimately ended up happening. We all know what happened there. Who knows? Neil Brown would have to be willing to play ball with that. I don't know, judging from the outside looking in, his personality, I don't know if he'd be willing to do that, unfortunately. But let me take a sip of coffee here. You guys drop any final thoughts you got in there real quick. I'm going to get up out here before too much longer. I'm going to take a sip of coffee real quick. All right. Excuse me. But interesting. Pulled your comment back up, Justin, because I was thinking there as I was wetting my whistle. But a name that I would be interested in if they were potentially do that would be Mark Whipple. Maybe, Neil Brown would do that for him because that was a guy that Neil Brown trusts and, maybe, but I think the only thing that's wrong with that would be, I don't think he certainly would not come here and just be an offensive coordinator in name only. He would have to be running the offense. And if Neil Brown's not letting anyone do that, then I don't think that Mark Whipple is going to come here. Having said that, they do have a relationship. So maybe that is potentially that one person Neil Brown would be willing to give up the reins to because that was his college coach. He gave him his first coaching job. So I'm sure there's a certain trust level there. And we know Mark Whipple has experience and would be a type of coach you could slap that title on. So just off the top of my head, anyway, that's one that could potentially happen there. But I find it unlikely that they would be able to do that. Just the main reason being, obviously, the West Virginia administration has not shown to be exactly the most proactive, judging by how they kind of handled things with this athletic director situation and, the Neil Brown coaching situation to end the prior season. So I don't really see that happening. I would be a fan of it as well, Justin. I think that would be awesome, personally. Let's see. Got anything else in here before I get ready to hop off here before too much longer? Just want to talk a little bit about those. The one move and the other almost move for West Virginia there, as Bilal Marshall hired as West Virginia's wide receivers coach. If you're just jumping in here late, go ahead, check us back on the playback here, and be sure while you're in here, drop a like on the video, please, and subscribe if you haven't already. Get some more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. That's what we're trying to do here, and it really helps if you hit that subscribe button and like the video as we continue to try and grow the Country Roads webcast community throughout Mountaineer Nation. But Eric here says, I may be wrong, but I feel like there's too many what ifs to entice a big name offensive coordinator. Exactly. I do too. I'm a little concerned, as I think a lot of people are at this point. And I don't know if it's just because of the news of one person you were trying to go after and it not, working out. Maybe that's one of the reasons we're all kind of feeling that way, but I'm definitely concerned as well. And I don't know about if it's going to be a big name at this point. And I think, as Jerry mentioned earlier, and as I said, my favorite, I think maybe if you can't get a big name, then maybe getting a legacy name like a Pat White is, one of the better things you can do, because that would, I think, reinvigorate the fan base at least. And that's one of the best things you can do at this point, and it's one of the things that you have to hope to do throughout this offseason, whether it be from bringing in some potential big name transfers or making a splash hire with this name of whoever you bring in as offensive coordinator. I think that's something you have to do throughout this offseason if you're the administration at West Virginia, talking about Gordon Gee, Board of Governors. Ren Baker, of course, coming in, wants to be successful. I think right now a concern for West Virginia is probably season ticket sales for next season. A lot of people didn't want to see Neil Brown back. A lot of people are upset. We've seen people say, oh, I'm not, renewing, things like that. So I think if you want to get those people back on board and, kind of get people drinking the Kool-Aid again, for lack of a better term, if you're not going to be able to make a splash name for this hire, maybe go get a legacy name, but you also need to win in the transfer portal, because either way, whether it's one of those two or a combination of the both, you've got to win back the fan base trust somehow, or at least win back the fan base enough that they have a little bit of faith to want to go to games next season, to want to renew their season tickets, because a lot of people are really down on the team. Not saying me specifically, I'm just, judging by what I've seen, throughout Mountaineer Nation, social media wise, interactions here on the channel, things like that. I think that the overall vibe is kind of negative right now. Some of the news that's coming out, just consequently has been, a factor of that. But moving forward, if they want to, fix that and kind of right the ship, definitely, getting a name. If you can't get a big name, a legacy name is what I would do. Pat White would be my choice personally. But I'm not making any decisions. And what do I know? I'm just a guy with a microphone and a camera. But that would be, I think, would reinvigorate, the fan base rather. And of course, I think continuing to win in the transfer portal. I think, getting a Power 5 tight end was good. People want to see more Power 5 players. But I think don't sleep on some of these group of 5 players. Deshaun Polk, I think, is going to be West Virginia's kick returner. But I'm actually really high on Montre Miller. And I know it seems like deja vu all over again, talking about being high about a group of 5 cornerback when we saw what happened with, Rashad Ajayi and then Wesley McCormick coming from the FCS that were highly regarded. But Montre Miller's a bit of a different animal, extremely fast, something those 2 guys didn't have that we were told that they did. But the proof is in the pudding for Montre Miller. Really fast 100 meters, really fast 200-meter speeds. Also at Kent State, 898 snaps with 0 penalties, 81 overall grade according to PFF. One of the higher graded players in the transfer portal if you actually go look. So I'm actually excited about Montre Miller, and I think West Virginia hopefully can win in the transfer portal. That can bring the fan base back around as well. Yuri Nator, yes, you can ask questions here. Come with anything you like. Of course, that's kind of what I'm doing here is taking some Q&A to close this out before I end up this live stream, in which earlier I talked about West Virginia hiring a wide receivers coach and who they targeted as an offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach with that search remaining ongoing. Justin Campbell says Rich Rod will be a good OC with the type of players we have. Maybe warm the fans back up to him, but such a touchy subject. Personally, I'd love to see Rich Rod come back. I'm on, maybe the other side of the fence than the majority, but I don't know. I think the majority may have started to shift a little bit. I don't know 100%, but in regards to that, I don't see Rich Rod going back to an offensive coordinator role. Especially now that he's back as a head coach and had great success in his first season at Jacksonville State. And they're really doing some things there. Go check out his interview he did with Dale Wolfley on Dale Wolfley's YouTube channel, The Wolfman's Call. Actually, some really interesting things there in that conversation. I believe they did it about a week or 2 ago now. But they're really putting some money in over there at Jacksonville State. They won their conference. They're moving up to FBS next season, I think, or the season after, 1 to 2. I can't remember exactly. But Rich Rod, back in head coaching. So I don't think he would move into an offensive coordinator role. But, if a coaching search does ever kick up at West Virginia, it's going to be brought up. It already was this offseason when people were thinking Neil Brown was going to be gone. And, if things don't work out next season and Neil Brown is gone, that name's going to come up. And it's coming up from boosters, too, from what I've heard. So who knows? Crazier things that have happened. We've seen a lot of people recycle coaches, and it hasn't been really successful for the majority of those. That's kind of what worries me about that. But of course, I also became a West Virginia fan in the early, 2000s, and, was in high school during the 2005 to 2007 run. So obviously, if there's any chance, even the smallest chance, a 0.001% chance of recreating that, I'm all for going for it, just like Lord Christmas and Dumb and Dumber. If you're telling me there's a chance, sign me up. I still support our team, but definitely disappointed overall. Everyone remember, it's not the players' fault, so don't give up on our Mountaineers. Exactly. That's the one thing that I'm going to continue to try and push here from us on the Country Roads webcast on our platforms and anywhere that I pop in, when I'm guesting with anyone else that, we interact with here that tries to cover the Mountaineers here on YouTube and podcast platforms, whatever, is that I know things are kind of seeming down right now. And of course we feel it as well. But the one thing that we can do as fans is just, get behind the team, cheer for them every game next season. I always like to say 0-12 or 12-0 is the mentality I like to have no matter what. I'm going to watch every second of every game and enjoy getting to watch the Mountaineers because, it's limited opportunities we get to do so. Only 12 weeks out of the year do you get to watch, Mountaineer games. And if you're lucky, maybe 13 or more, but you get a guaranteed 12 times you get to watch them, in 1 year. So, 12 times in 365 days, you get to watch them. So let's not take those for granted moving forward. And I think there is some things to be excited about. We got some talented players coming in like Rodney Gallagher. We're going to have a quarterback we recruited out of high school starting for the first time in a long time. I mean, when was the last high school recruited quarterback to start at West Virginia? I believe it was Paul Millard back in 2013 or 2014 to actually start a game at West Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know. It's interesting. Or at least to start the season, I guess I should say. I think to start a game was probably Chris Chugginoff back in 16 or 17, whatever year that was. But you got 2 good ones, dual threats battling it out, and we're going to see as I've covered here on the channel, the return of an offense that we all really liked. Speaking of Rich Rod, Justin Campbell, we're going to be running more, read option and RPO type plays, with more heavier sets with multiple running backs on the field at the same time. Neil Brown confirmed as much on signing day, as did JT Daniels when he departed. Go check out the video we did covering that here on the Country Roads webcast if you haven't already. And that's exciting to me. That's one of my favorite offenses to watch. I think the offense is kind of going to resemble the 2016 West Virginia offense when Skylar Howard won 10 games at West Virginia. Wendell Smallwood led the Big 12 in rushing, and you had speedy guys on the outside to throw to, and you hit a lot of deep balls. West Virginia, I think, is bringing in a lot of speed. Traylon Ray, Rodney Gallagher, Jeremiah Aaron has speed. They've got speedy guys potentially at wide receiver, may bring in some others in the transfer portal as well, already have, and Deshaun Polk, who's a return man and a speedy guy of his own. And I think you're going to have, air raid passing concepts and your air raid stuff in your route tree. Of course, that's probably going to all stay there intact, but you're going to see more RPO. You're going to see more 22 personnel, 21 personnel, 12 personnel, multiple tight ends, multiple running backs on the field, and going to see a lot of read option and triple option concepts, I think. So that's exciting for me, as well as having a dual threat quarterback. We've all talked about how West Virginia has been successful in the past with dual threat quarterbacks traditionally. Neil Brown's been successful here at West Virginia when he's been able to run the football. 18-4 when the Mountaineers run for over 100 yards. Also undefeated at West Virginia and at Troy when his teams run for over 200 yards in a game. So the fact that West Virginia is probably going to run the ball more next season, I think, is a good thing. Kind of plays into the strengths of this roster, which is a good thing to see. And, who knows what can happen in doing that. So let's continue to support the team, agree overall, for sure. For sure. But having said that, guys, appreciate you all tuning in here that did. I know, like I said, a little bit earlier in the day than I do these live stream Q&As and have been keeping up with them weekly as much as we've been able to. It's been busy lately, but we're going to try and get back to doing at least one weekly Q&A live stream here on the channel, and had some coaching news to talk about, so wanted to do that and then mix in a little Q&A as well. So we'll do another one here in the future, but also looking forward to in the future, there's going to be a CRW Hoops podcast episode dropping, which you can find on the audio side on any podcast platform, and of course the video version on our YouTube channel. So if you're tuning into this live stream on the Country Roads Webcast Facebook or Twitch, be sure and hop over to the Country Roads Webcast YouTube and subscribe there to catch the podcast episodes, or subscribe to us on any podcast platform if you want to just listen to the audio version of those. Got the basketball version and the football version as well. May throw this up there on the podcast feed for you guys on the audio side, since it does have some coaching staff news that I want to talk about, but we will have other podcast episodes for the football side dropping throughout the off season. And of course, like I said, continuing to cover basketball with the CRW Hoops podcast, and then exclusive to the YouTube channel, been doing WVU basketball post-game reactions when we can. I know we've missed a game or two throughout the season, but we'll get back to those here with the game on New Year's Eve against Kansas State. And then, of course, like I said, podcast episode dropping on that. And then we'll continue to cover these West Virginia football coaching staff updates as they come along, whether it be who West Virginia is targeting or if a hire comes out. I'm sure it's not going to take long. Expect something here in the next few days, I would think, in regards to who will be West Virginia's offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach moving forward, as they have missed on one here, as we've seen, but who knows who the name will be. Hopefully it's one that excites us. But I appreciate you guys that have tuned in here, whether you've tuned in on any of the three platforms, for sure. Nancy Johnson here in the comments says, should see Coach Rod back, also Pat White. Yeah, can you imagine having Pat White as offense coordinator, Coach Rod as head coach? That'd be interesting, and also makes me feel extremely old. But I'm very interested in hopefully maybe there will, I don't know. I'm just trying to speak it into existence, guys. I'm not claiming to know anything here or anything, but I would love to see us go after Pat White. I mean, we're in need of a quarterbacks coach, and he can have the offensive coordinator title in name, and Neil Brown can, really run the offense if that's what he wants to do, which is what it sounds like is the situation. And I think that would be ideal for both parties, Pat White and West Virginia, if they're not able to lure a big name, which they haven't been up to this point. But having said that, that's kind of the situation as it stands right now. Just to recap here before I close this out, West Virginia has hired Bilal Marshall to be wide receivers coach for the 2023 season. Was wide receivers coach at VMI this past season, previously a graduate assistant at West Virginia there that worked with the wide receivers. And West Virginia still remains searching for another position, though, on the coaching staff, as they have one more vacancy to fill. They lost Tony Washington and Graham Harrell Tony Washington coached wide receivers, obviously replaced by Bilal Marshall. Graham Harrell, the West Virginia offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach last season, so West Virginia looking to fill that vacancy. Advanced talks with Clint Trickett, didn't extend an offer, so that didn't happen, but West Virginia remains on the search for an offensive coordinator and a quarterbacks coach for the 2023 season. Whenever that name comes up, whoever it is, we will be right back here to talk about it again on the Country Roads webcasts, maybe even do another live stream with you guys, but be on the lookout for live streams in the future. If you are subscribed, hit that notification bell so you can know when we do them, because sometimes they're impromptu, kind of like this one was, only scheduled a few hours ahead of time. But going to try and do these live stream Q&As weekly. So if you enjoy popping in and asking questions and interacting with us, you'll have plenty of opportunities to do that in the future. And like I said, stay tuned for plenty more content here, covering this offseason news on the football side, and then, of course, continuing to cover the basketball side with the CRW Hoops podcast episodes and basketball post-game reaction shows. So any more coaching staff news that pops up, I will see you guys again in the future, but appreciate you guys tuning in here this time as we have hired a wide receivers coach out West Virginia, in Bilal Marshall, and remain on the search for an offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach to replace Graham Harrell. Excited to find out who it is and excited to see what else happens with transfers throughout the West Virginia offseason as the transfer window is now open. Sure, there'll be more to report on that side as well. So excited to see that, but got one more comment here from Baxter Mallory. Winston Wright got a touchdown on a kickoff or a punt. Fact, I think he got a couple of instances and no one since Tavon. Yeah, Winston Wright ran a kickoff back, indeed, Baxter, but no punt return touchdowns since 2012. Tavon's against TCU in that overtime game in which they ultimately beat us on a 2-point conversion. The guy actually didn't catch it, but whatever. They went for 2, got the win. But that was the last time West Virginia ran a punt back for a touchdown was Tavon Austin 2012. But yes, Winston Wright did run back a couple of kicks. One in Neil Brown's first season, I believe, in 2019. And then against Maryland, nearly ran a couple back, but got stopped, short of the goal line, and then did run one back the next week against, who was that, Long Island, I believe. So, yeah, Winston Wright had a couple kick return touchdowns in his career, but punt return touchdowns, West Virginia's definitely left a lot to be desired since 2012. But great point there. Yeah, definitely may have misspoke and said both, but I meant only punt returns. But yeah, Winston Wright did do a great job for West Virginia kick returner and hopefully does good at Florida State as well. Appreciate you tuning in and chiming in as always, Baxter. But having said that, guys, I'm going to hop up out here before too much longer. Like I said, got some plans with the fiance this evening, or I'd love to stay with you guys longer as I typically do on these Q&A streams. But like I said, we'll do one again here before too long where maybe I can stay with you guys a little bit longer and we can interact a little bit more. But wanted to talk a little bit about this coaching news. So got that covered for now. And we'll see you guys again here in the near future, whether it be with some basketball coverage or some more updates here on the football side with the coaching staff news and, of course, transfer portal news that remains ongoing as well there, with West Virginia still looking to add 6 to 9 more transfers there in the transfer portal, as they've only added 3 up to this point. But having said that, appreciate you guys tuning in here to the Country Roads webcast. As always, I'm Jordan Cruz. And until next time, let's go Mountaineers.